I'm Dave Greenwood, and this is Overcoming Distractions. If you are an adult with ADHD, a busy professional, an entrepreneur, a high achiever, or just need some strategies to navigate your adult ADHD, you're in the right place. Who am I? I'm an entrepreneur with ADHD and the author of 2 books, Overcoming Distractions and Overcoming Burnout. I coach and mentor people just like you, and together we navigate the ups and downs of adult ADHD. From getting out of our own way to helping people just like you thrive in the workplace. That's what I do. Want more info on working with me? Hit overcomingdistractions.com. Ready? Let's get to today's podcast. All right, everybody, we're back. You know you are Overcoming Distractions. If you are that busy adult with ADHD, you're looking for some quick tips or some more methodical strategies to actually thrive in your busy, demanding career, your demanding home requirements. You just don't feel like you're able to navigate and thrive, you are in the right place. If you just want to hang out with us and say, hey, that's me, that's cool too. Everybody is welcome. And if you suspect you have ADHD but aren't officially diagnosed, again, we don't discriminate here. So anywho, real quick, if you love what we do here on Overcoming Distractions and you want to support the show, if you know me, if you've listened to me for any length of time, you know that I don't even speak to my family without coffee in the morning. So just go to buymeacoffee.com/overcomingd and buy me a coffee, buy me 2, buy me 3, whatever. It is greatly appreciated, and I need coffee to actually get through these podcasts. So it is buymeacoffee.com/overcomingd. Next, if you are that busy adult with ADHD, you feel like you need to spend some one-on-one time with somebody to do some problem solving, to work on, I would say, the mechanics of being an entrepreneur, an executive, a busy professional with ADHD, and you need to do some problem solving, just go to the homepage. It's overcomingdistractions.com. Click that little button. It books a 15-minute Zoom chat with me. Let's see if we're a good fit, and let's see if we can work together to kind of smooth out some problems. So, all right, cool. Let's get right to it. Those are the housekeeping notes. Now let's get to the action here. So, and if you are currently surrounded by Post-it notes, sticky notes, you're going to want to hang out with us, because this whole episode is definitely for you. And I know when we talk about productivity, there's the million different components to it, but one of them is planning. And I could go a couple different ways with this. Some of us are good at planning and then we don't execute. Some of us execute without planning. You guys know who you are. But here, I'll speak for myself as a busy entrepreneur with ADHD. I'm convinced that if we slow down, we plan out some of the aspects of our career, our home life, our workload, all those things, I think it's going to make a significant difference in our lives. We're going to feel more fulfilled. We'll thrive more. We'll feel less stressed. But we got to get to that kind of planning phase. So, and I think this goes without saying, but I do say this a lot, is that what works for you may not work for me. So, but I think the bottom line is I think all of us can benefit from some type of planning. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how to plan, why, how to select the best planner. And that's the topic for today. So we have Grace Koelma. She's the author of the ADHD Focus Friend, the future ADHD digital planner. And she's the host of the podcast, Your ADHD Besties. Did I get that right?
You did.
Cool.
Well done.
What else can we add to your resume there?
Oh, I would add that I'm also an avid coffee drinker. I'm right with you there, David. So yeah, I
Cool.
can't function without it either. Yep.
All right. So you guys buy me a coffee. I'll share one with Grace, and then
Yeah, sounds
a lot
ideal.
of us will be happy. I understand Grace probably drinks coffee at 10 o'clock at night. I'm a morning
Yeah.
person.
No, we were saying before the call, it's 10 p.m. in Australia here for me, but I actually find that a great time to do interviews. I'm one of those ADHD brains that really kicks off at nighttime. So yeah, this is great.
See,
I'm happy to be here.
and that is a perfect example of what I just said because I
Yes.
am brain dead after like 7 o'clock at night. So could I muster up the energy to maybe do something like this? Yeah. But I'm certainly not going to go out of my way to schedule working after like dinner. So
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
so let's start right at the beginning of this challenge. You have a lot of experience in this. Why do you feel adults with ADHD actually struggle with planning? And that could be planning even the simplest tasks or maybe more long term, like maybe trying to plan out, maybe they're in a demanding career and they've got to kind of put a little more um uh methodology into like planning out a week and project and small tasks and larger projects and what have you.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in that question. Uh, Talking about like planning our schedules and planning goals and stuff, maybe we can come to in a little bit, but you talked about like why ADHD adults find it hard to even plan small tasks. And I think that they're oversimplified in that neuronormative society. It's
Hmm.
we grow up inside of this bubble, inside of this indoctrinated bubble in school where we're taught how to do things a lot of the time in a neurotypical way. And schools and teachers and universities are all constructed in a way where we're on timetables, there are bells, we have assignments, due dates. Everyone's kind of pushed through the same sausage machine. I
Hmm.
have a background in teaching, and that was one of my frustrations as a teacher, and partly why I left teaching and moved into journalism and writing and then into creating these planners is because I was frustrated with how rigid those systems were and
Yeah.
how they were a one size fits all. And I think when you grow up in that system your whole life, you're just sort of like soaked in this negativity where you just feel like you can never figure out a system that works for you. You're given a school planner usually the beginning of the year and you're meant to stick with that. Teachers don't put any energy into explaining how to organize yourself or why some tasks need to be broken down. They just assume you know how to do them. And it's a lot like contrasting it with creativity. Often in school, there'll be certain kids that really need a lot of help getting started with creative tasks.
Yeah.
And teachers are more, are more used to having to break that down for students. But ADHD students will often never struggle with a creative task. They have a million ideas. We have these divergent brains.
Yeah.
So if you contrast what we're really good at with our challenges, it's really interesting that the things that we struggle with don't get more scaffolding in school and they're not really focused on. They're just assumed that we'll know how to do them. But that's because it's a neuronormative model.
Yeah. I mean, I know I've worked with people here that uh this is a common scenario I see where, all right, I blocked out time to do XYZ project. Cool. Big win. Okay. Um, but now I sit down and I need X, Y, and Z to actually do this project. And then that stops them in their tracks. And then they don't maximize the time that they actually set out or block to actually do the project. So now they have to backtrack, which then throws them off the rails, so to speak, when maybe a little
Yeah.
bit of pre-planning, I know pre-planning is that's like pre-boarding, right? but a little bit of planning would have uh enabled them to maximize that time that they blocked out, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, it's not something that comes intuitively to us. So when we're looking at those traditional planners, your average day planner or monthly planner, they're very bare bones. They're designed for people who can fill in those blanks themselves, who kind of can see a blank page of paper and go, "Yep, I know exactly how to write lists and how to prioritize and how to look at different options and how to time block that out." And so when I started thinking about how to create products to help ADHD, is my first thought was, well, I don't use a planner, so how can I get myself to use one?
Yeah.
And looking into the research around different traits of ADHD that are studied in the literature, like hyperfocus, like long periods of time that we like to focus for, that we will often forget to look after ourselves in that time. We need reminders for self-care. We need reminders to have breaks.
Yeah.
We need reminders to time block things out. On one page in the Future ADHD Planner, we have like the boring tasks that you have to do at the beginning of the day. It's like literally a list called boring stuff, boring but necessary tasks. Then you have like a little box underneath that that's like a rewards box. And it's these sorts of additions to a planner that help ADHDers have that scaffolding on the page. We don't have to start afresh every day and create that for ourselves. It's already there. And even though it's not, it's not a magic fix, it's that idea of not having to reinvent the wheel every day, that you already have these prompts designed for your brain on the page that support you.
Yeah. When it comes to like an effective planner or a journal or some
Mm.
type of task management system that people can um utilize effectively, um do you feel there's some resistance to that structure? um because all you need to do is get on Twitter and see people in the ADHD world saying, "Oh, I tried this for a week, it didn't work. Now I tried this," or now I'm trying three planners at the same time. Or it's like, whoa, time out a minute. I mean, do we resist that structure? Do we just go to the interesting thing instead of the important thing, so to speak? Do you find that
Yeah.
common? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think initially we are drawn into the dopamine and excitement of a new system. And we get a lot of, we can often distract ourselves as well by trying to find a new planner. It's like, okay, in order to start this project, I need to find a brand new planner. I need to reinvent the wheel, like we were talking about. We have this almost this desire to reinvent the wheel, even though it's probably not what we need to do.
Mhm.
And initially, that rigidity is helpful, but I think what I find with a lot of systems that I've tried in the past is that they're not flexible with my brain. They don't actually plan for me to be inconsistent. They plan for me to be consistent, which is the first failing, because the ADHD brain is famously inconsistent, and it's actually a great thing. Depending on the type of work that we're doing, if we can kind of harness that project based inconsistency where we're just hyper focused or working on a certain project for a certain amount of time and then we're moving on to something else. Those sort of like gig economy works really
Yeah,
well for ADHD as freelance work for that reason, entrepreneurialism, because you're sort of focused on the next big, you're hunting down the next big thing.
sure.
I know that not all jobs work that way, and I know that it's really difficult if you are an ADHD in a job that is far more routine and structured, maybe more like you're working as a nurse in a hospital or something.
Yeah,
That's difficult. But I think that when it comes to looking for something that will work for us, we need to find something that is ready to embrace inconsistency. And I think ADHD has wasted a lot of time trying to find new systems every time. But when I was designing my product, I tried to design something that would welcome them back in when they took a break. And like, I mean, that can apply to anything. It can apply to a different planner as well. But I think it's really important to figure out a system for when you fall off the bandwagon. How are you going to jump back in again? And do you feel that you can do that without feeling ashamed? Because if you're feeling shame, then that's probably not the system for you. Maybe that's too rigid or it's set up in a way that's too complicated for your needs and you need something that's a bit more flexible and customizable.
I've used this example a few times where, and this is an example of, I don't understand why, but it was a colossal failure. Is that I use the my email program, and there's the calendar, and like folders on the left, and then there's the email down the middle, and then down the right hand column you can adjust these things, where uh I have the calendar, and then it's got 4 or 5 days scrolling down. I never really use it, so because there was a whole calendar section. So there was an ability to change that column to put the to-do list in there. And I'm thinking, wow, why didn't I think of that before? So I put the to-do list right on my screen where I'm looking all the time at email and what have you. And I thought
Mm.
that was brilliant. It was literally right next to my emails and I never looked at it. And it's
Yeah.
literally not even an inch away. And so
Yeah.
that I think that goes to everybody's like different in terms of it. And again, I
Mm.
don't know why I didn't look at it because it's literally staring me in the face. And I always say something's got to be in your face to actually be effective, as far as I'm concerned. But that didn't work. I mean, have you experienced things where it should have worked
Yeah.
and didn't?
Yeah, I think that it's like that banner blindness, or I don't know what a better term for it. That's a very entrepreneurial term, but like it's that idea that when you see something too often, you just or you blur it out. It's like it's invisible to you.
Yeah.
I think another thing that struck me as you were talking was that a lot of the time we have too many types of tools set up to support us. We'll have a monthly view and a weekly view and a list and a itemized list in a different category and color coding. And sometimes that can be helpful, but I think that if we overcomplicate it that way, we end up having a bunch of tools that can make us feel, oh my God, I give the impression that I'm organized. Look at this whole suite of tools. And
Yeah.
especially with digital products like what you're talking about, David, you can drag and drop things around. And
Mm,
I think, again, I don't know what it is about ADHD as a neurodivergence in general, but I think we get really excited about setting stuff up, but then it's way too complicated to maintain. And so I think like going with the bare minimum and finding just one thing that works and just repeating that every day if that sits and resonates for you instead of trying to like basically take information and put it on seven different lists that represent different timelines, that's pretty overwhelming. And I think we have that all or nothing mentality where we think if I can't do it perfectly, I won't do it at all. And
yeah.
working with my community, I found that come up a lot where people will, start using the Future ADHD planner and they'll say, I want to get everything set up. And then they'll just get overwhelmed and say, I can't do it anymore. And when that happens, I'll often say, like, just pick the page that lights you up the most and just use that, like put it on a clipboard, print it out if you need to, even though we sell digital too, like it's print it out, stick it on a clipboard, and then just use that for 10 days. It's actually like that positive constraint theory of often we have too much choice and we need to just dial it back to one thing and see how that works for a while instead of always going out trying to find something else, which just leads us into more procrastination.
Hey, gang! Dave stepped out real quick to grab a cup of coffee, and if you know Dave, you know he doesn't even speak in the morning without a ton of coffee. So why don't you buy Dave his next cup of coffee? Go to buymeacoffee.com/overcomingd and get him that cup of coffee and support the show. Your support will help keep Dave awake and help keep those podcasts coming out on time. It's buymeacoffee.com/overcomingd. Okay, he's back.
You mentioned something, and I see this as well, where we, a lot of us with ADHD do love setting things up. It's like new. And I would say that's a form of planning. So why, why can't we maintain that? Is it because of the newness? It's like, oh, I got a new system and this is shiny. And because to do that, we needed to plan, correct? And then something happens and we can't sustain that. Is it just down to it's just new and we're excited about it, but we figured out that it wasn't as new a week or two later?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, you'll know, and so many of your listeners will already know that the ADHD brain thrives on novelty, and obviously, the thing that makes us creative, divergent thinkers is coming up with new ideas, working on new projects, finding something new in every project. Maintaining an organizational system is basically data entry, one of the
Yeah.
most boring tasks, and so getting it set up is that novelty factor. And if we're using color coding or if we're using a new program, in order to learn a new program, our brains are learning and activating that kind of dopamine response that we get from learning. So that is sort of feeding our need for novelty, dopamine, our interest-based nervous systems. But once that becomes routine, it's just a chore. And it's taking us then away from doing the exciting work. It becomes just this big block of admin in our calendar. And so I think a lot of the time start prioritizing the more exciting tasks, the creative tasks, if we have to do a PowerPoint presentation, we'll focus on the color scheme, instead of the content because
Right.
that's more interesting.
Yeah.
And where our brains are really, really good at doing that. They're really, really insistently good at always finding something interesting in the problem that we're solving, which is great if you're working in a field like advertising or marketing or, engineering or inventing new products or entrepreneurialism. Like that, they're the kind of industries where our brains just thrive, or even problem solving in medicine, like working with different patients, searching for the solution to stuff. But that's where our brains are best. They're not going to be in their best form when they're just trying to do that routine admin over and over. Whereas other types of brains, other, neurotypical brains, other neurotypes really enjoy the routine of and ritual of, doing the same thing over and over. And that
Yeah.
and that actually fulfills those kind of people. Yeah.
Right. And I think if we can get to that point, we do see I have a morning routine, for example, which I think is critical, whether it's, the coffee, having breakfast, but then there's like, maybe I got a medication that needs to, and that's got to be literally in the same place every time. So that structure has paid off. And I know, for example, like if we go on vacation and those things are in a different place, it's it's like they don't exist sometimes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for me at least, certain areas of the day where there is structure and there's like a home base, so to speak, it is just like mission critical to me. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
I, I also know that we aren't good at planning while we're driving our car or doing five other things. And I always recommend to people, you've got to just find, whether it's a few times a week or maybe it's like first thing in the morning or what have you, to just hit the pause button instead of literally racing to your desk and trying to get this stuff done. I think slowing down, the payoff is dramatic. So do you
Yeah.
have any advice for people how they can implement those times where they just like hit the pause button? And because otherwise you can't just plan when you're doing 100 other things.
Yeah, and I think the delusion that we often fall into, especially when we don't have a system set up or we're in between systems, is we think, oh, I'll just keep it all in my brain. I'll rely
Yeah.
on my brain. And the only thing I found helpful in terms of multitasking, just to land there first, is that I found just the idea of brain dumping helpful. And I think the real drawback in a traditional planner, whether it's a print book or a digital one or your computer, is that you don't always have it with you. One thing I found helpful is having a smartwatch or an Apple Watch where you can just talk into it as you're on the
Yeah.
fly and say, add this to my list. It's going to be a bit of a higgledy-piggledy list because often the voice activation will misspell things, but it's enough to kind of give you the threads for later. And I think coming to a space where you have a routine of, I'm going to sit down now, and then looking at that list as a starting point is helpful. But I think what I've realized in my own journey and then thinking a lot about how we approach planning as neurodivergents is that it's a transition for our brains to go from our ordinary living, which is very divergent, a lot of thoughts flying around, a lot of anxiety and stress. And I think quickly to touch on the fact, I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but I think the reason that we both love and hate planners as neurodivergents is that we hate them because we don't like rigidity and we get bored and all of the things we've talked about, David, but we love them and we need them because
Yeah.
they actually can alleviate our anxiety. They can
Right.
alleviate that stress because it's like our brain on a page. And so I think what the sticking point is that and I love that you've used the word slow there because I think we rush to that position of I can quickly get this down and plan all this stuff. And actually, our nervous systems need to settle. And we need to actually move from divergent to convergent thinking. And I actually read about this first in Tamara Rosier's book, Your Brain's Not Broken, which is an
Right.
excellent ADHD read that you probably
Yes.
know, David.
Yeah.
And when I was reading it, I designed a tool to help people move from divergent to convergent thinking. And it won't work for everyone because it's not everyone's style, but it's a coloring in task. And it's different to your average coloring in task, which is, kind of proven in mindfulness to help you calm down in general. But in this coloring in task, it's just sort of a geometric pattern. And you have to color in different shades of one color. So it'll say, color this geometric circle with all these different sections in just shades of blue. And what that does is it helps you sit down at your desk and transition and say, okay, transitions are hard because I've got ADHD and I'm not going to be able to switch from out in the world, rushing around, doing all my things straight into this task that's hard for my brain that I'm not a natural at. I have to transition. So by coloring in this thing, you sit down, you've got one thing to get you started. Perhaps you light a candle, perhaps you've got your favorite, coffee, glass of water, you're in front of a nice view, you're in your comfy clothes, maybe some music. All of these things help you transition. And you color that in. And it's amazing how the restriction of only coloring in one color moves your brain into convergent thinking because suddenly you're thinking about making decisions within that tighter framework instead of all of the possibilities.
Yeah.
And that's just one example, but I mentioned the other things like candles and music because there's so many ways. And I think the joy of all of our brains being so different is sort of saying like and delighting in the fact that we can be curious and say, I wonder what's going to help me create ritual around planning and make it enjoyable. It doesn't have to be this horrible task. It can actually be something where I slow down my nervous system, take some breaths, and then put my brain on a page and see if I feel better afterwards. So it's an act of self-care.
Right. And as you mentioned, there's people who, all right, I'm going to go to a coffee shop because I love the whatever vibe in the background. I got to
Yeah.
put on some death metal music. I got to light a candle.
Yeah, perfect.
For me, it is absolute dead silence. Like even like a fan, or
Yep.
like an air purifier. I
I'll
want
do it.
dead silence. I've used and this has helped me in a number of ways, whether it's like hitting the pause button to like, just rework my to-do list and all that stuff, or just to like chill out for a few minutes. Is years ago I used to go to these networking meetings in Boston, but I would have to park in a parking garage, and I would actually go all the way down to the bottom of the parking garage, which was like several, whatever,
Mhm.
100 feet below.
Yeah.
And it's dead quiet in there, except for the
Yeah.
occasional car going by, and
Yeah.
it's just, I can't explain it, but I would sit in my car for like 20 minutes before the meeting. I'm like, this is kind of cool. There is not one noise.
Yeah.
And I know
Yeah.
I'm
And
weird, but that's,
no, I think the thing is that weird is subjective. We're all weird, but also like yourself, and I think that's the message is like encouraging people to figure out what their thing is because that makes a lot of sense. Our worlds are overstimulating, and ADHD brains get overstimulated on a sensory level a lot by lights, sounds, screaming children, demands, notifications, too many choices, our phones constantly. And so going like it's almost I'm assuming you probably didn't really want people contacting you down there either. It's like going into flight mode because you're trying to hide
right,
underground
right.
and and do whatever you have to do. Like it's being organized is a difficult thing for us. So we deserve to pamper ourselves or figure out that neuro-affirming way of doing it that our brains like sigh with relief and say, "Oh my God, thank you finally for doing what I needed." How
Right.
long has it
Yeah.
taken you? And also, it's taken us so long because we were raised in schools and families where that wasn't encouraged. We lived in noisy households, in
Yeah.
noisy classrooms, and in open plan offices, which are just insane when you think about it. Everyone trying to,
Ex-
organize their email schedule while there's noises going everywhere and lights
yeah.
and
And people walking
fans and
back and forth and everything else. Yeah. All
yeah.
right. So let's tell everybody about the ADHD Focus Friend. What are the how can this help people?
Yeah. So when I wrote a book, it was off the back of the Future ADHD Planner, and the publishers first came to me wanting me to make a print version of the planner. Um, and I said no because the whole point of the planner being a digital like planner is that you can move everything around. You can customize it. You can take out pages. And if I put it in a print book, I'm doing the opposite of that and
Yeah.
forcing people into a rigid structure. So I said, no, I can't do that. So instead, I decided to create a workbook that is half sort of a traditional book and workbook, and the second half is an undated planner. And it's not for a whole year. It's not meant to be. It's just not, I can't remember, 60 pages, I think, of undated daily pages interspersed with a sort of reflection spread every 10 pages. It's called Take 10 Every 10, and it's designed to take stock and reflect on, your whole mind and body and your whole life. But I wanted to make it every 10 pages and not every 7, so people didn't think it had to be done in a week. And that's revolutionary. Like that doesn't get done in traditional planners. It's always
Yeah.
on a calendar.
Right.
And then in the first half, I wanted to sort of set the scene by not just focusing on productivity and not just focusing on productivity hacks, but focusing again on like emotional regulation and nervous system regulation and reframing how we approach productivity. Because you can't come to any kind of planner with that old view, that's that sort of neurotypical view that's sort of soaked in shame, like we were saying. It's about reframing your approach to it and sort of giving yourself permission to go down into your dark car park underneath the ground or whatever you need to do. And that the first half of the book gives you permission to do that. So it's a bit of
Yeah.
like a permission slip. And yeah, that's the ADHD Focus Friends, and it's only been out for a month, but so far the response has been amazing, and I'm just so excited that it's resonating for people, just like I hoped it would, because I wrote the book that I wish I'd had back when ADHD was a new thing for me. So yeah, it's really
Yeah.
exciting.
No, and I think you sliced off an important part of ADHD, which is that planning. Because there's, I could rattle off 10 different ways to plan as a busy person with ADHD. It's the Post-its, it's the piece of paper, it's the Evernote of a Notion or a Trello or everything. And I think
Yeah.
it sounds like that you've really put a lot of energy into this very important part of being a busy person with ADHD.
Yeah, it's about how you feel about yourself really at the end of the day, and there's no one system that's ever going to work for everyone or for you your whole life, but really your feelings about yourself and your competency and understanding your brain will always trump any tool out there. And then it'll
Yeah.
just give you that confidence to go forward and design a system that works for you and change it if you need to.
Cool. Awesome. It's the ADHD Focus Friend. I'm assuming people can find that either on your website or all the usual Amazon, etc.
Yeah, it's in stores, particularly in America. It's well stocked at the moment. And in the UK and Australia, less so, but getting there.
Okay.
But yeah, it's on my website, futureadhd.com.
Futureadhd.com. Cool. All right. Check this out. I know when I work with people, that planning piece is a significant chunk of our time, so to speak. So I am going to grab one, and I encourage you, everybody out there, to check this out. So thanks for coming on. I know we were trying to do this a couple months ago. Stuff happens in normal people's worlds and ADHD worlds. So I'm glad we were able
Yeah.
to connect, because again, this is a big part of the ADHD journey.
Yeah, it is. Thank you so much for having me, David. It was a great chat. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.